Okay, we're going to start the meeting. We got people here, and our speaker has got other things to do. So, before I introduce town administrator, I want to review with you the speakers we have for the next 2 months. The next meeting, which will be on August 5th, and our speaker will be Michelle Ecklicks from the Registry of Motor Vehicles. And she would be back doing the driveway driving decisions. That's what she's going to be talking about, driving decisions. The next one after that will be September 9th meeting, and the speaker will be the Plymouth County Sheriff, Joe McDonald. And he's going to be doing the history of the jail down in Plymouth. Anybody interested in knowing about the jail, he can help you out. So what we need now is speakers for October and November. And I think we may have one for October. If anyone can think of someone, anybody they want for a speaker, let me know. Because October and November will be the last ones for this year. So anyway, we will now introduce our speaker for today. There's a town administrator, Cody Haddad. Come on, Cody. And I met Cody at one of our sessions we had up in, was one we checked way back at the Ale House. I think it was the last one up in West Bridgewater. And that's when I met Cody, and to me, he's just a great guy. And you don't see many people that you call a great guy anymore, but I call Cody a great guy.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Very good. Thanks, Ken. So thanks for having me. Cody Haddad, Town Administrator. I'm going to keep this. I have a few things I want to go over. A lot of you probably think, what does a town administrator do? What does your town administrator in Halifax do? So I have a few things I'll go over, and then I think really open it up to questions, because I think that's the best way. Is you probably have a lot of questions about the town, things going on in town, and hopefully be able to answer some of those questions for you. As was announced, my name is Cody Haddad. I'm the town administrator for the next 12 hours or so. Today is actually my last day in Halifax. I've been here for about 2.5 years, and I'm moving on to another community, the town of Dartmouth. So it's been a pleasure kind of working here. Halifax is really a great community. One of the things that makes it so special is all of you, the community itself, and really the employees. So not only is the team here competent and they do an excellent job, but they're great people, and you don't find that everywhere. And it's one of the things that made my decision so difficult in deciding to move on from Halifax was the team that we have in place. So I'm going to miss everybody in the community. So many of you, just having conversations with you, getting to know you. So I'll miss everyone quite a bit. So, what do I do on a daily basis? Every day is different. So, I have various meetings, deal with various situations. The board, I report to the Board of Selectmen. So the way that a town administrator is hired is the Board of Selectmen will conduct interviews, and they appoint the town administrator. So that was me in this case. They're going through that process now. And my role really is to oversee the day-to-day operations of the town. So everything going on daily in all of the departments, really it flows through me into the Board of Selectmen. And also, the board really is the chief policy maker. So I run the day-to-day operations, and then the Board of Selectmen, they create the policy. So when they want to see things shift one way or the other, they make those decisions, and then ultimately it's on me to oversee and pass down to the team to make sure that those things actually get done. What does that entail? So Halifax is unique in, we have several hundred employees, over 100 full-time employees, and we don't have a human resources department, right? Any business would fail without a human resources department and that many employees. And the town has certainly struggled, but ultimately without that falls on me. So I serve as personnel, human resources. That includes collective bargaining. So, within those employees, we have 6 unions that we have to bargain contracts for. Legal, right? As you would imagine, we deal with a lot of legal issues, whether it's collective bargaining agreements. We're negotiating contracts constantly for services. We're potentially in litigation sometimes, and we have counsel that represents us, and ultimately I'm the one that oversees that process as well. Procurement, so as we purchase things, it sounds simple, go out and purchase it, but we can't just do that. There's laws that we have to follow, and so I serve as the chief procurement officer. So purchases over a certain threshold all have to be reviewed by myself, making sure we're following the proper procurement. Large projects, so I'm sure many of you have an interest in the new Council on Aging, right, that we're constructing. So that's a project that I'm overseeing, my office oversees. I'll get into that and kind of where we stand with that shortly. Large renovations, working with our municipal school building committee to making sure that those things are done, and holding contractors, making sure they're on schedule and getting the work done. Supporting various boards and committees. So Halifax is a small community, so the staff isn't huge. So in a lot of communities, you would have a planning department. You would have several other departments that we do not have, and ultimately that ends up relying on me as the town administrator. So you may recall we've done several zoning bylaw changes and bylaw changes. That's a group that I've supported over the past couple of years, going to the meetings, preparing things. The town is currently undergoing a government study committee. So Halifax doesn't have what's called a charter. So many communities are bound by a charter, which is basically, how the community runs, how are employees appointed, boards and committees, how are they made up. Halifax doesn't have that. We just have bylaws. And, the days of only having bylaws have really passed, and every community needs a charter. So we're working with a government study group, and we're looking at implementing a charter. So that's another group that, my office supports. Preparing for town meeting. So we have our annual town meeting. It's not just, doesn't miraculously the warrant get sent out to you. It's all preparation, that lot from our finance departments. But at the end of the day, usually it's myself that puts it together, and that gets out to all of you, and you can see kind of at town meeting, most of those things, there's questions. I have to be prepared, making sure that we know the answers to, implications to certain things. The town meeting is a very busy time of year for me and my office. Really, from January through May is probably the busiest. We're preparing the budget, right? The budget's another big thing. We don't have a finance director in Halifax. So we have a town accountant, but we don't have a finance director. So the town administrator effectively serves as the finance director in Halifax, overseeing the budget, making sure that, looking at revenue projections, how much money do we have coming in to the town, and what can we afford to spend, making sure that we're staying within, our levy limit, so we can increase taxes 2.5% every year, making sure that we can afford that and continue to provide services to the community. And then commercial development. So anytime there's commercial development going on, it has to go through various boards and committees. And that really, the town administrator will serve as a conduit to making sure that they're getting through if there's any issues with a project, right, working with the various boards, committees, and making sure that those projects are moving along. So my day really varies. I start my day typically, and I look at my calendar for the morning, and by the end of the day, it's nothing what I thought it was going to be. But that's why I enjoy it, because it's something different every day. I get to be involved. I get to do things like this. And also we get to see a lot of the kind of fruitful things happen, like when we have a new building go up, and we see all the hard work that went into it, or we have a new program. So, Darlene did a great job with the dementia program that we had, the Age Wave, and, Darlene oversaw that grant. But working with Darlene, that's something we saw, and we said, okay, this is fulfilling when we do this every day and these things happen. Some of the other great events that you have at the COA, I was fortunate enough a few months ago to come over on a Friday for art class. And, again, those are the types of things that make it worth it. There's a lot of nights I'm pulling my hair out and I'm saying, why am I doing this? But those kind of remind me of why I'm doing it. The COA project, I'll get into that a little bit as a whole. So you may recall going back to 2023 in December, we approved some zoning changes that allowed for the development on Montponset Street, 265 and 266 Montponset. The building on 266 is going up. If you drive by there, you can see the large building going up, about 30 units, condominiums. And now we are in the process of, and this is where it gets back to that procurement, right? It's not as simple as we just hire a contractor to build our COA and we get it built. It would be quite a bit cheaper if we could do that, but the Massachusetts procurement laws don't allow for us to do that, and there's several good reasons why that's the case. But we have to build and do all of our work at what's called prevailing wage. So prevailing wage, the state sets a standard of what we have to pay, contractors who do work for us. So a building that would cost someone in the private sector maybe, $1.5, $2 million, likely will cost us $5 or $6 million, just the result of prevailing wage. So we have to follow a procurement process. Any building or large construction project that is over $1 million, we have to hire what's called an owner's project manager. And if you hear meetings, you'll hear me refer to it as an OPM. And that is basically a project manager for the town that we hire who oversees the project on our end, make sure that the contractor is doing what they say they're going to do. They're a team of architects, engineers, professionals. They also prepare the, the bid documents for the bid of the design of the new COA. So we have hired an OPM, and they are in the process of preparing the bid documents. Unfortunately, this is actually a small project, so you hear $3-4 million, and you think that's a pretty sizable project. In the municipal world of construction, it's actually quite small. So we had a hard time getting an OPM on board, but we can't move forward unless we have one. So we put out bids, and we only got one response back for a project of this size. And when I spoke with some other professionals in the industry, I said, why didn't you submit a bid? It's probably a $300,000 or $400,000 project for them. They're going to make several $100,000. And their response was, well, why would I submit a bid for a $4 or $5 million COA when I can do a $70 million public safety complex, or I can do a $300 million school, right? And it's a lot more work, but it's a percentage base that they make. So if they're making 5% of the project, 5% on 70 million or 300 million is obviously a lot more than our small, $3 or $4 million project. But we were able to secure an OPM, and we are working with them now. We've had some delays, unfortunately, just with them preparing the documents on their end. Again, being of the smaller project, we unfortunately are kind of getting put to the bottom of their list because they have higher priorities. And they, I don't want to say they know, but unfortunately they kind of know that we don't have another option, right? They're our only option. So we are working with them, and that'll certainly be a priority for the next town administrator coming in. The land over there will be getting conveyed to the town later this year, so the town will officially own the 2 parcels of land. So if you're looking at the new building being built, 266 Montponset Street, across the street where there's the little office there, we're going to own 2 parcels over there. So if you're looking at the roadway that goes into the parcel, to the left where all the construction equipment is, that's where the new COA will be. And then to the right is another parcel that the town will own, and that's actually where the pickleball courts will be. They plan to construct the pickleball courts later this year, and they'll gift those to the town. And then hopefully we'll begin construction on the new COA. I think it's reasonable to say early 2026 is probably a good idea of what we're looking at. The good thing is once we start the project, again, it's a small project for a municipal project, so it's going to go up very quick. We anticipate about maybe 6 months from the time that they break ground to the time that that building is up and running. So it's a good thing. Unfortunately, these things take a lot of time. We're not, thrilled. I'm sure you aren't thrilled, but it can assure you this has been something that we know has been going on for a long time. The talk of a new COA, and we are certainly closer now than we've ever been before. The funding is in place, and we're in a good position to make sure that this happens. So with that, just wanted to give a general overview. You can hear I have a little bit of a cold here. I don't know why with this hot weather, but it just seems to be the way it is. And I have a lot of things to do. I have a lot of things to get done, but I will certainly open it up for questions. If there's any questions about anything going on in town, more than happy to answer them. Yeah, so a charter is all-encompassing there's certain things in a charter that you can do to limit, and there's certain things within a bylaw that you can't do. So one of them is, if you look up composition of a board or committee, if you want to have a list of all the boards and committees and what they're made of and what their responsibilities are, that's more of a charter, and it governs exactly what those things are. Charters are adopted really one of two ways. One way is through the state legislature as a special act. So we would create a charter, town meeting would approve it, and we would then send it to our legislatures, and then they would actually bring it forward at one of their sessions, and I think it would pass, in the legislature, and then it would become law here. The other way to do it is a home rule charter, which is a little bit more encompassing on the community itself. So you actually have to get 10% of the registered voters in town to put forward a petition to create a charter commission. The charter commission is then elected, so people would run to be on the charter commission. They would have a certain amount of time to develop a charter. They would do so. They would bring it to town meeting. Town meeting would then vote yes or no, and then it would go to the ballot and have to pass the ballot either yes or no. And then it still goes to the Attorney General for review to make sure that it's legal. So it really just governs everything. It's one place where it's very specific, and there's certain functions that you can include in a charter that you can't in a bylaw. So town administrator is a good example. The role of the town administrator has vastly changed over the past 10 years, we'll say. If you look at our bylaws, it doesn't mention the town administrator. There's no mention of the town administrator in our bylaws. If you look at the Board of Selectmen, so the Board of Selectmen, really have all the policy authority within town. They hire me, and I run the operations. There's 2 lines in our bylaws to say what the Board of Selectmen's responsibilities are. And we hear often, so water. I'm sure you all know water is a major concern in town. Water quality, everything to do with water is a concern we hear often. I get concerns in my office often. The board is always fielding concerns. But we don't have a charter that gives a clear structure of government here. And so one of the things when people are upset about their water, and there's things I wish that we could do, I wish we could make some changes. The reality is I have no authority over the water department, and neither do the Board of Selectmen actually have any authority over the water department. So you think, the average resident thinks, okay, I'm going to elect the Board of Selectmen, they're in charge, they run the town. If I have an issue, they're the ones I'm going to go to. Not the way that this town is set up, because we don't have a charter that makes things direct. So we have an elected water commission, and they actually run the operation over there. So when people have an issue with their water, you have to take it up with the water commission. And unfortunately, if you don't get anywhere with that, that's your ending point right there. You vote for the water commission, so you can make your choice at the ballot box. But ultimately, I have no authority, the board has no authority. And that's a tough thing to explain to people who are having issues. Water is just one example. It's pertinent right now, so I'm using that. But that's one thing, regularly I'm explaining to people, I'm sorry, I can't do anything. We try to work together, to explain these things, but at the end of the day, they're not accountable to, the board, myself, or anyone. And so that makes it challenging. Those are the types of things that I think the Government Study Committee is looking to clear up in a charter. Clear chain of command, structure, hierarchy, and at the end of the day, that right there, if something isn't getting done, someone's accountable, right? And you can say, look, if that's me, Cody, the job isn't getting done, we have expectations, you're not meeting that, we need to bring someone else in. Or at least the buck stops with somebody. Somebody is able to get things done. So that's kind of a long explanation, but hopefully it gives you some insight. Yes?
Yeah, I think right in that circle, you're right about the water department, the commission is seconded for the town of Halifax, but also they have to answer the DPW, the state, correct?
So there are certain things, DPU, Department of Public Utilities, but as long as things are safe, basically, right, then the state typically doesn't step in. The state doesn't step in on how you operate a town, right? They as long as things are compliant with the law, and water quality, for instance, the water is safe, annual testing gets done, the state's not going to step in and say, we don't like the way that you're operating this or doing that. They really are they're regulators that oversee things.
About reaching always consider ourselves small. But unfortunately, we're too big to consider ourselves a small community anymore. We've reached out, I was on the Cable Advisory Committee, and we reached out to Plimpton and Carver and kept the community TV alive. We've moved the dispatch down to Duxbury with a number of towns there. And I just happened to be thinking about trash removal. We have our own trash set up here. I believe the truck is probably run twice a week. Both after. What if we reached out to Pembroke and asked Pembroke? I think Pembroke might have a private hauler.
So we do have a private hauler for our trash. We do. Allstate Waste is our hauler. So every 3 years, we bid out a contract. So that's another thing that my office oversees. And so we're actually going into the last year of that contract. But that's what we do. We do a competitive bid process to get the best price for the town. And so this past contract, it was Allstate Waste. And so the totes that they're picking up with your trash, that's all. So the town pays them, but Allstate Waste is the private hauler. And then we basically issue that fee onto the residents with the trash fee. But Allstate Waste is the private hauler that we look at. So we do our own recycling. Right now, we have our own recycling truck. It's something we've looked at, and done a cost-benefit analysis. Does it make sense to maybe move to the private hauler for recycling as well? And it's certainly something that the town will look at in the upcoming contract to see if we should continue doing the recycling on our own or if we should include that in the private hauler. Recycling used to be actually a pretty good business to be in because you actually made money on recycling. So when you brought the truck would pick up the recycling, you would bring it into the facility, and the town actually, in these haulers, would actually get a small check from the recycling. It's actually changed completely in the past 10 years or so, where we're paying the same price to get rid of our recycling that we are our trash. So right now we're paying about $110 a ton, or $115 as of July 1st, to get rid of our trash, our solid waste, and we're paying right around that same mark for our recycling. So recycling is just as expensive, unfortunately, now, and so it's become expensive for the town to run. It's also a truck, a recycling truck. They're not cheap. So our truck's getting to the end of its life. A new truck is likely $200,000 or $300,000, right, to get. So we look at, do we want to keep paying for that and those capital costs, or do we want to get a private hauler to do both? But those are the things we're always looking at. And as far as regionalization, you're absolutely right. Communities need to look at those things. Halifax has been successful with several things, our schools being one of them at the higher levels. With the regional dispatch center, we've had some success in the cable TV, but it doesn't make sense everywhere. And so, we have to make sure we're looking where it makes sense. One of the things that I had a conversation very low level with Plimpton about a year or two ago was the COA. So we're building this nice new facility. It's pretty center in town. Plimpton's right down the street. Just would Plimpton want to consider, joining ventures? We'd have one COA here in Halifax, and Plimpton would basically pay a small assessment to Halifax. Save them money, we would bring some money in, and the response was, no, we want our COA. Our COA is our COA. We don't want to give up that control. Okay, so that doesn't make sense. We've looked at it with our building commissioner. So our building commissioner left at one point, and we were looking for, what are we going to do? We thought about regionalizing. I reached out to 4 or 5 other communities, and everyone said, no, we're not looking to give that up right now. We share a conservation agent, so we had hired a conservation agent maybe 2 years ago. The person didn't last very long in the position. It's hard to recruit for part-time positions, right? People want full-time work. And I was at a meeting and was speaking with the Bridgewater town manager at the time, and he said, hey, we're looking for a conservation agent, and we ended up making it work. And so now we have a conservation agent who spends 20 hours a week in Bridgewater, 20 hours a week in Halifax. It's Bridgewater's employee, and we just pay them an assessment. So it saved us a lot of money, and we've gotten a little bit more a quality staff person because it's a full-time position, versus if we were hiring for 20 hours a week, the quality just wasn't going to be there because all the quality staff were looking for really full-time. So we're always looking at it, where it makes sense and where we can save the town money. You have to have two parties that are willing to work together, right, in the relationship. And so I haven't had this experience, but I have counterparts who have had the experience of sharing a position or something, and they want to see every week that the employee was in their town Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 8 to 4. And the reality is things come up in Halifax on maybe Tuesday and Thursday, and I need that person to help out. And so the relationship doesn't work if you're going to nitpick every little thing. So you kind of need two parties that are willing to work together. But we're always looking at that when possible. You're welcome. Any other questions?
So I know you have to go, but there's one big $1 million question.
Oh boy.
What do you think we're going to do with the old building? So when we're ready to move,
It's a great question.
but when people have projects on relation to the center, but those are things that need to be done over time.
Right. Yeah, it's a good question. And I don't think we have a clear answer for that yet, Darlene. But one of the things that you see is we have a lot of historic buildings in town. And so we have the old schoolhouse, right? We have the blacksmith shop, and then we have the museum, and then we'll soon have the vacant Pope's Tavern. And it's great. They serve a nice historical value. They're great buildings, but they're not utilized, right? So the blacksmith shop and the old schoolhouse, they're open once a year, right, for holidays in Halifax typically. And the reality is we're spending a lot of money on those buildings. We spend insurance. So insurance, this is the other thing. Again, my office oversees insurance. We've been dealing with, those are considered vacant buildings. They're used once a year. They're considered vacant buildings. Insurance companies will not insure vacant buildings. So the option is, do we pay a higher premium for a vacant building, or we go without coverage, or we look at needing to get rid of these buildings. So it's something I've been in communication with the Historical Commission and our Municipal School Building Committee, that something certainly needs to be done with these. Either we need to use them more and provide a value to the community, and that could be in various forms, right? Opening these buildings up, allowing people to get in them more often. Or we need to look at maybe passing them on to another group who would utilize them more, and then at least the town isn't on the hook to pay for these buildings anymore. So I think, again, this is high-level discussions. We haven't decided anything yet, but one of the things we thought of was, the museum is actually it's a pretty good building. And if you walk around Town Hall and some of the buildings here, you see we're busting at the seams. Really don't have office space. There aren't a lot of meeting spaces, right? So a lot of times if there's meetings going on, right, people are kind of scrambling. Where are we going to hold the meeting? So one of the things down the road is potentially, renovating part of the museum and making that into some additional office space and some meeting space for the community, and then turning Pope's Tavern into really the historical building, because Pope's Tavern has some real historical value there, and make that the building where all of the Halifax items are in there, and then trying to figure out what we're going to do with the old schoolhouse and the blacksmith shop. So if anyone has ideas, I'd recommend that you get involved and share those with everybody, but it's certainly on the town's radar. I'll give you the example of the museum. It's not utilized that much, right? The Historical Commission has meetings there sometimes, but we have to run dehumidifiers, and we have to keep the building at a reasonable temperature so it doesn't get mold. And last year alone, we spent almost $10,000 on electricity at that building. Right, almost $10,000 for a vacant building in just electricity, right? So that's not a good financial decision for the town. So what are we going to do? Because we also don't want the building to become infested with mold, and then it becomes a serious problem for us. But it's certainly something on the town's radar, and we're not flush with cash, right? The town is in some tough financial times. So how do you say to residents, hey, we might need you to pay more in taxes when we're spending $10,000 a year on electricity in an empty building? And so several boards and committees are aware of this, and they're supposed to be working kind of over the next 6 months or so to develop a plan of what we're going to do going forward. Good question, Darlene. Anything else? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, they would definitely need a permit if they're running a business. So I would recommend if someone has a complaint to notify the building commissioner. And building commissioner is also our zoning enforcement officer. And so he would take that under advisement, and he would, likely do some sort of investigation, drive by, speak to the owner if he needs to, and would advise of, hey, a lot of times people just don't know. That really is majority of the case. They just don't know what they need to do or get a permit. And so most of the time when we run into these things, we let them know, and they either cease operations or they'll get the applicable permits that they need. So I'd recommend if anyone has a particular complaint, and that one in particular, let the building commissioner know, and he'll certainly look into it. Thank you. Yeah, you're welcome. Anything else? Very good. Well, thank you. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate it.
Only thing I can say, Cody, as far as I'm concerned, we're going to miss you.
Thank you. No, I miss everyone here too. It's been it's bittersweet.
I mean,
it's very bittersweet. It was, driving in for the last time this morning. It's very bittersweet. I have a lot of emotions today.
yeah. Well, you've been here, what, three years or so, was it?
Yeah, 2.5 years.
2.5 years, yeah. Well, you've been a great guy, and you've done so many changes.
Oh, I appreciate it.
And when I read in the paper here just a few weeks ago that John Bruno, he's off now, and then now we're going to leave you, I said, holy mackerel, we're losing the big guys here.
The town's in a good spot. I think we have, strong leadership in the board. We have a good board, and I think, the town will continue progressing forward.
You think so?
I do. I'm very confident.
Great. You have that in writing?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, it's good, Cody.
Yes, thank you.
Good luck to you in your future, and
Thank you very much.
we'll miss you.
Oh, sure.
And the simple fact of the matter is he's been the most progressive in terms of advocating for our seniors. We're gonna miss that, and, we've gotten closer than we ever have in terms of moving forward. And there's one thing that can't change, is aging. So, let's roll with it, and he's been the most progressive, so we're not be. Anyway, awesome. One more?
One stomach. All right, that's awesome. Thank you.